Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview Patricia Gannon, founder of Platforum 9, whose entrepreneurial journey from Ireland to the Balkans and beyond has transformed how lawyers connect, collaborate, and build a community. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. My name is Tom Martin. I'm your host, and I'm thrilled today to have Patricia Gannon as a guest. She is the CEO and founder of Platforum 9, which is a virtual platform to share the best of ideas, and also Gannon Advisory, where she advises tech companies and law firms. And so happy to have you here, Patricia. Welcome.
Thanks a lot. Great to be here. I'm excited to share the story with people.
Fantastic. So on our podcast, we share stories about innovators and how they do what they do. And so I'm really excited to talk with you because I know that you've had a journey that has kind of come together and a constellation of different experiences that has made you who you are today. And so I'm really looking forward to getting to know you better.
Thank you. Absolutely happy to share. I guess let's start in the beginning. When it came to studying law, I always thought I was going to be a lawyer. Even, back in school in the west of Ireland, where there was only one country solicitor in the town. I had sort of decided I wanted to study law, a combination of, classic American TV shows about what a lawyer is, what a lawyer does, which of course, not really based on reality, in our world, in Ireland anyway. But also I wanted to do something that was constantly changing. So the idea of always having to continuously learn, being able to serve clients, being able to interact with people. When my kids were small, I remember being asked, what does a lawyer do, mommy? And I'm like, I help people. And I think that if we look at it like that and frame it like that, it's quite a nice thing because we help our clients, we help solve the problems for our clients, and that to me was very appealing. So yes, I then studied law in Trinity College in Dublin, which was a lovely place to study law. We had literally 67 or 68 of us in the class, a small number made up of students both from the North and the Republic. Fabulous venue, rather a liberal college, shall we say. Wonderful professors, cutting edge policymakers and lawyers. So I felt it was a real privilege, and in a beautiful setting. It was a real privilege to be able to learn from people who were at the cutting edge of the policy issues that were going on in the country at the time.
Well, thank you for teeing that up. I do want to go back even further though. So what's your hometown and where did you grow up?
Town is probably an overstatement. 3,000 people live in the village of Boyle, in County Roscommon. I was brought up near the Atlantic, beside a national park. Very sheltered, classic. I'm the oldest of five. Classic Irish education at a time where the country was really, going from a very poor, the 80s and 90s. It was just grey and raining, So it was a dark place to be. Our European accession, we had joined the European Union, back in '74. And we were starting to pick up really, the benefits of that. I think policy-wise, Ireland had decided, given that we were a small agricultural country, that we actually had to do an awful lot to attract FDI. And given our historical relationship with the United States, that was the obvious place to start. So the IDA, or the Irish Development Authority, was very, very powerful in attracting, the largest US pharma and tech companies to Ireland and have them relocate and set up their European bases in Ireland. And that was sort of the key to the major transition that took place in the Irish economy. Yeah, it was super interesting though.
From a different perspective, I remember in the States that in the early 90s, late 80s, The EU was just a brand new concept
Mm.
for us as Americans, and just learning. I wanted to learn so much about it and how it was changing things, unifying the market, and all that was exciting.
Yes, and it was a long and complex process. And if we take a look at it, for all of the naysayers, with respect to, the European integration strategy, it has resulted in generations of young people traveling to other countries, being educated in other countries. This free movement of talent and capital has resulted in a much more economically stable, union, challenged a little bit in terms of its global positioning at the moment. We're slightly different when it comes to regulation. We'd be very, the rights of the individual are quite important. Data is important. So probably privacy is, way more important maybe to us than other parts of the world. So, I think we have, a large number of member states who have to agree to everything, which does result in the process being slower. So we have a slower legislative process. And we have probably, more expensive institutions because of languages and, so it is but at the same time, it is representative of the personalities and the people and the cultures that live in this, diverse Europe, but it's for Ireland in particular, as somebody who grew up, as I said, in the rain and the misery and the cold and as an isolated island back then, it was a remarkable leverage and bridge to the rest of Europe because we'd felt geographically isolated. And I think it certainly brought us closer, and we certainly have a strong role within Europe, small country, but a little bit louder than probably sometimes louder than we sort of maybe should be. But we've got a place at the table, and that's good.
I'm an American, but I live in Vancouver, Canada, so I do understand the rain and the dreariness.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to ask you, I'm curious about early influences and your parents. What did they do, and how did?
Educators, they, principals at the school and stuff, so if they were educators, there's nobody in my family. I mean, I don't come from a line of lawyers. And maybe that was part of the intrigue was to do something quite different to family. For me, early influencers, probably some of the strongest influencers I had on my my university life. I was like 17 when I went to university, so I was quite young, and out of it with a law degree by 21, I think. And
Wow.
probably, yeah. So we have a different system. We kind of start earlier, and so early influences being very actively involved with the anti-apartheid movement. And one of my professors was Kader Asmal, who became Nelson Mandela's Minister of Water in South Africa. Afterwards, he's an Indian who had been my professor of human rights. That was super interesting, having direct access to people who then went on and fulfilled a really interesting role. More interestingly, was working with Mary Robinson. I actually worked at the Irish Centre for European Law when I was in college. I worked with Mary and Nick, and we ran conferences on Saturday mornings for Irish lawyers to bring European law closer to Irish solicitors. And then Mary went on to run and become the first Irish female president. And that was a super exciting journey to see, to have direct access. She was our professor of European law, and she was a barrister as well. So she was, she'd come and teach us unruly, 20-year-old students, having done a full day down at the bar at court. And I think for me, watching how, firstly, a woman from the west of Ireland, highly educated, certainly on the social justice side, could actually campaign and become a president. That was just remarkable. And the president after her was our professor of criminal law, Mary McAleese, who was from Belfast. So yeah, having had these strong, civilly active women around us in these formative years, where this can-do mentality is there, just go for it. I think that is super empowering. And I think for all, for women in general, having role models around you, working their way to positions of power, is super, super motivating. Yeah.
I think that's amazing. It can't be overstated. I think the concepts that we grow up with by just seeing examples around us that normalizes achievement and success and all of those good things.
Yes, I mean it's just you can do this too. Now maybe not, but the fact is that people have the underdog. I've always kind of if I look at my personality, I've always kind of supported the underdog. It's always about finding the person that nobody thinks is going to get there, but they're going for it, and they have a band of merry men and women around them that help them get there,
Yeah.
and I'm quite attracted to that sort of philosophy.
One thing I noticed about your experience at Trinity is that you were part of the Free Legal Advice. Is it an association
Yes,
or
back.
well?
Yes. Well, I mean, that was funny because, well, it wasn't funny. I mean, it was, free legal advice centers. But, we were, very junior lawyers who, again, went down to legal FLAC clinics and it still exists where, anybody who walked in off the street would have an issue and, you would be quite often, I won't say super supervised. I mean, it was an element of, taking the details. You probably weren't giving pure advice, but quite often, if we look back on part of the role, for any street lawyer with people coming in off the street, is, you've got to be able to adapt. You've got to be able to listen. I would say I'm not saying it's therapy, but there's certainly a listening element to, what's going on. So at a very early stage of my career, having access to the direct experience of facing a client, even if that client was coming for free legal advice, the fact is you had to treat them equally as responsibly as any other client, and respectfully, and listen. And it was great flexing at the age of 2021, being able to flex yourself out and, understand that client facing direct experience early is really key. Yeah. I recommend that all young lawyers, any opportunity you have to get access to real practical exposure with the vulnerability, you'll have your vulnerability because you don't know all of the answers. And these are people with difficult cases in front of you. But just being able to listen, to be able to understand the right kind of questions to ask, even if you don't have the answers.
Well, I think that early experience and also willingness to help people is kind of underlines your career.
Well, yeah, yes. Well, I hope so. I think.
So from that point, was it directly that you went to go work in the
Yes, then I then trained. In Ireland, we have this solicitors and barristers situation. So after you finish your degree, I decided I wanted to be a solicitor. Trained at a commercial law firm, and then through that process, decided I wanted to. I think from early on in my career, I knew I wanted to live internationally. So I applied and was accepted as a stagiaire at the European Commission in Brussels. And that was super interesting because I was the president of the European Law Students Association in Ireland at the time. And then I was elected to the international board in Brussels. So that kind of aligned together. So from my very, very early legal career, I was absolutely committed to internationalism, committed to, the experience that younger lawyers can get by cross-border exchanges and working cross-border and understanding the comparative elements of law, in other jurisdictions. So that was a wonderful year, super exciting, and then the European Commission paid for a group of us to go to Taiwan and to Japan and Singapore and Hong Kong, and that we were representing European law.
Quite the world traveler.
Oh yeah, oh yes, always.
Yeah.
Oh, got to be on the road. I love it. But it was interesting, even as young lawyers. Of course, we had like no money. We had very little sponsorship money for it. But you were interacting with. We met with the Japanese Bar Association, and we talked about the challenges at that stage. They were not they weren't really open to international lawyers coming into the market and stuff. So it was quite interesting looking at sort of protectionism and cultural stuff, and really, really interesting. And that gives you the sense that although we may be working in one jurisdiction, we're still part of a community all over the world. So having done that and then worked at the European Commission, which was interesting, I worked in DG11, which was relating to the environment. At that stage, really interesting. It was, working on
DG11. What is that?
Yeah. environment.
Oh,
I worked on the environment, DG environment at the time. And it was interesting because we obviously have European law, which has a direct effect on national legislation. And, there are cases taken against member states if they fail to implement European law, and the European Commission is behind that. So that was also super interesting on a practical level, looking at the kinds of cases that were being taken and stuff. So, and watching how a huge administrative institution works. So when I look back at my career, I feel blessed that I've had a huge variety of exposures within legal. And I think that gives you a fantastic overview as to where your strengths and weaknesses are. I loved, the internationalism of the Commission. It was perhaps sometimes quite slow, but, but massively complex because both the legislation itself and the process by, defending it and stuff. That was an interesting process. And then the excitement happened when I moved to the Balkans. Again, married a Serbian lawyer, moved to the Balkans, wrong time, wrong place, war, bombing, sanctions.
yeah. That was around what, like 95 or so?
Yeah,
or
93, we met end of 93, 94. I was so at the end of 94, yeah. So quite a challenging, dark time. But yeah, I guess, young, what do you do? It was, what was interesting about that story was being firsthand, uncomfortably out of your, familiar background in any sense, not understanding language, context, really challenging in terms of sanctions and, living under sanctions, no power, no food, nothing on the shelves in the shops. I mean, hyperinflation. Yeah, really looking at it now from here, I sort of go, wow, but, you just get on with it when you're kind of young and so that was interesting. And then building a firm, building a law firm from day one, sort of building that firm was fascinating. I mean, there was no choice. I was not going to do nothing. So the point was, okay, what has to be done here? And there wasn't really a single law firm in the country that did what we were doing and stuff. And we knew, I think at the beginning, we're 3 founding partners. We knew that the day was going to come where, Milosevic would be out of power. And we'd be looking at massive amount of reconstruction and work to be done. And ultimately, a country of 22 million people called Yugoslavia, which then broke up into 6 republics. All of those republics, new legislation, new countries, new everything. And we, as we started in one market, we did move into all of those markets. And that was just looking back. I mean, we, quadrupled in size year on year for the first couple of, it was just running, massive privatization projects, lots of USAID investment and money and support and, all of that going on. But what it did result in is, a fabulous, massive transition from a socialist post-war economy into a Western, democratic economy on a path to Europe. Many years later, we're still on the path. It's a long and rugged road to Europe, but that is still, stated to be the strategy of the country. And I think along the way, from privatization to infrastructure projects to banking and finance to employment law, real estate, everything, we built this firm of now over 250 people in 8 markets. So that was a lot of work, but it was fun though, because you really very early on you could see the fruits of your labor. You could mark progress, so that was roller coaster journey.
that was the Karanovich and Partners, right? That was the name of the firm.
Karanovich originally, yes, yeah.
Wow. And so how many years was that?
20 years in the Balkans. And what was fun about that was, I think from day one, like, again, I wasn't admitted to the local bar. So that was one of the challenges we overcame, which was that I focused on building everything. And that's where I probably realized, if I look back now, I probably realized I was entrepreneurial even then. I just again, back to this West of Ireland endurance sort of mentality, is just roll up your sleeves and get on with it, right? That kind of strategy. And at the time, it was just about having the vision. Nobody really, without being, too overly direct about it, nobody really knew what to do. And because I'd worked at a law firm, I understood the structure behind a law firm, how you can build a business, even though I was young. I mean, I was only 24, 25 or whatever, but I think understanding that you wanted to be a center of excellence for young lawyers to come and learn and train. Just speaking English. People didn't speak English back in the beginning. Obviously now they're amazing and they're really brilliant language skills. In the parts of the world that don't dub their television, the children have outstanding language skills. So in the interest of promoting, multiculturalism, take away the dubbing. Just get them to listen. They absorb it all like sponges. They'll have it all and they'll be multilingual before you know it. But, so that was kind of an interesting process because, as I said, we put it on the map and built it and created, became absolutely, and to this day, dominant market leader, I would say, in the region, from the region. Yeah.
Well, what I'm hearing, number one, grit, and a sense of a do it yourself, get it done attitude, combined with, I think, and I hear this a lot from people that I talk to that are innovators, is having this kind of cross-pollination and cross-disciplinary experience that, and I actually just wrote about this recently, that I think being a generalist, especially right now, is more of a strength because you can see into these different pockets of experience and how they connect together. Whereas, someone who has experience maybe 9 miles deep just can't see that.
I also think there's an agility to the mindset. Like, again, if you're in one lane, your brain, your, neurons, everything is entrenched. So if you've got multiple lanes and you're curious about what's going on in the other lane, so I think it starts with curiosity, actually, a curious mindset, which I fundamentally think all lawyers must have a curious mindset. And an agile mindset then allows you, based on that curiosity, to sort of move around. So where's the opportunity? And just connecting dots that maybe others didn't see, certainly didn't, back then. But and I think, lawyers of the future, we need to support in our structures, systems and systems that allow them to, to be more curious and agile and give them enough time to be able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious about how you transitioned from Serbia to the International Bar Association. Was that part of that transition?
Yeah. No, well, I always did the IBA. I mean, to be honest, again, part of our challenge from day one when building a law firm in an unusual jurisdiction, which was like Serbia in 1995, was one, put it on the map. People did not know where this country was. It was recently emerged. It was over there in Eastern Europe. Where exactly was it? Was it Siberia? Where was it? People constantly mixing it up. So put the country on the map was number one. And then put ourselves, there as the go-to firm for international law firms serving clients in this newly emergent region where there was nobody there. So we were very lucky in the sense that, there was an opportunity simply created out of politics and, post-war. And out of that, recognizing that opportunity, gearing yourself up for that opportunity, and then systemically building relationships with all of the law firms that were going to be doing business in that region. Being their trusted local advisor was key. But that doesn't happen overnight. You've got to spend years and years and years at it. So the International Bar Association was an important part of that because it is a place where a huge number of the largest law firms, at least in the world, are present and active. And I took an active role all along and then worked my way up to where I've ended up as chair of the European Regional Forum, which, was basically all of the European countries, in particular, the largest forum actually within the IBA, which I did about 4 years ago. So, so I think international networks, like you can see where we're getting to here, like the international networks were always an important part. For me personally, because it meant, again, reliving the student story, which was about the internationalism and the diversity and the curiosity and learning from others. That just continued on in my career. And the benefit to the firm was huge in that we were then positioned back to personal brand and firm brand, two very important things, which every lawyer who's listening to this, you have your own personal brand. It should align with your firm's brand. Over time, you can maybe get away with it for a while, but ultimately going back to your core values and your firm's values, it's much more powerful when they align. So, building that brand continuously over time, using the tools, using networks, using podcasting, using whatever's out there, but be consistent about your messaging. So for us, it was about always being top tier, fully integrated, anticipatory, very pro business. Because people didn't know our part of the world. Something that I built, which I thought was a really good idea. I still think it's a good idea, actually.
What was that?
Because we were, a lot of these larger firms look for referrals. So, it's like, we're sending you this amount of business, but, when there's an international piece of work, would you mind sending it to us and whatever? But because of the region we came from, which was sort of underexposed, and there weren't a lot of, people from that region that were, because there was so much opportunity in these emerging markets, people tended to invest locally. They were not going to the London or Paris or wherever. They were not going too much internationally in the beginning. And so we weren't really in a position to do much referral back. And then I thought, okay, how can we add value? How can we give back to all of those firms that are supporting us? And the way I chose to do it was we built something called a market opportunities, database, where we identified per market, per practice area, what are the deals that are coming up next. So for them to go back to their corporate client base and say, well, we've got a road project, or there's an airport privatization, or this whatever, there's an opportunity coming up. It was very good for them to be able to go back to their clients. Particularly if you're a global firm, you're basically presenting to your clients that you have capacity to serve and deliver across the world. Well, that also means you're really adding value as a lawyer. If you can go back to a GC and say, I know you're looking at Eastern European strategy or expansion or whatever. We know that there's either a factory or a logistics center or whatever coming up for privatization or whatever. It might be an opportunity that you would look at. Those clients are super happy. They're super happy. Why? Because their competitors are going in. So if you can actually give them the edge. So this was something that we did, and I think they still do that. And that was very, very valuable and well received. It also meant that we were in the conversation. So as a law firm, you need to ensure, or a lawyer in a law firm, you need to ensure that you're part of the conversation with your clients. And I think that's something that we don't spend enough time, maybe at the senior level, where there may have some time to do a strategic discussion in advance about expansion or issues or whatever. I think it's really important that you take that opportunity, take the time off the clock, ideally off the clock, to talk to your clients about their strategy. So yeah, that's what we did.
Well, let me see if I understand that, because what you're saying, like, besides the obvious services that you provide to your client, and because you had mentioned that one of the friction points was maybe not the ability to provide referrals back and forth and be part of that, to be part of the business conversation that way, that what you did is you established value by creating like a center of intelligence that didn't directly benefit the firm, but benefited its clients, and thereby indirectly benefited the firm by making it part of the conversation. Is that?
Yes, by having yourself at the center of it. Nobody else had done it. It's certainly not in that kind of way. And it was just making it easier for law firms that are covering all the markets in the world. If you can have somebody, sort of your local, it's not your office, it's an independent law firm that you work with when you need, but actually having that person aware of, when is that tender coming up, or what is the value, or have you heard of other people? And so it's market intelligence ultimately.
Yeah.
And that served its purpose quite well. But I guess even thinking that way, if I look back on it now, that was pretty innovative. So thinking about the problem, thinking about a potential solution, thinking about how you as a lawyer put yourself in the center of that discussion, and control that discussion. Not a lot of lawyers are doing that, really.
Yeah, I think that's a very powerful vantage point to have, because I think most lawyers are artisans, and they do the work that's in front of them, but don't necessarily see it from the outside perspective, which is most valuable because that's what benefits our clients.
Yeah, and again, because I wasn't able to practice as a lawyer, I didn't, in the local market, I wasn't admitted to the bar. It was going to be a nightmare to get admitted to the bar in Serbia, and I wasn't going to do it. And I thought, I've got 200 of them. They're all that. I'm going to do something different.
Right.
But But using, again, going back to use your competitive advantage. We all have a competitive advantage. Being able to identify it and then just use it. And by the way, be lucky to be in an environment with partners or others who will allow you to do that. I was lucky in that sense. I just did my thing.
Well, I think it was a very clever solution to the circumstances you found yourself in,
Yeah.
and a great way to leverage it. So that seems like a perfect segue to Gannon Advisory, because you took that approach and then you employed it within your own firm, right?
Firm, yes. So having exited, lots of drama, but essentially exited the firm, say 4 or 5 years ago. I then thought, okay, what do I want to do? I thought, the Balkan story is over, but it was interesting because with all of the experience that I'd had, there were some other firms that were looking to see how to put structures in place. And I thought, okay, well, let's give this a go. And had a very successful, it's still there, but I have very little time for it now, to be honest, for obvious reasons. But it is still there. And what I put into effect was, advising and consulting law firms on strategy, partnership programs, positioning, marketing, acquisitions, did mergers, so that was quite interesting. And I realized, there is a different perspective, and it gave me another perspective to my own firm, which was quite useful, because you then saw the pain points at different sizes of firms, and I think that has also fed in very nicely to where I am today, ultimately, because there are such a huge variety of law firms, all shapes and sizes, and constantly evolving. It's it is evolving. We might think it's evolving slowly, but actually, the whole myriad of the ways in which legal services are now being offered is remarkable in the last 10 years, right?
Yeah, it's been a sea change, I think, especially in terms of the enthusiasm and interest in the change, that was the big friction point. So Platforum 9, my understanding, and I'd love to learn more about it, but that it is a virtual forum for exchanging the best of ideas.
Yeah, well, let me tell you. So,
Yeah.
Platforum, it's an app. It's a social audio app. Essentially, some of you might have heard of Clubhouse. Clubhouse came out. So it had a day, and it's still not gone, but actually, obviously had a moment with COVID in particular. And like everybody else, within the IBA, what was interesting is we'd immediately, all of our live conferences had suddenly gone to webinars, and we had suddenly, transitioned into, a digital world where we're connecting through that. And that in the early days, that was really for everybody, it was super important. We were all very unsure about what was ahead of us. We were all, COVID and lockdowns, etc. And I think that continuity, that need to be connected was super important. But then after the first month or so, I realized everybody's turning off their screens here, and then I realized actually, because most lawyers, part of our job was to interact with our clients and with our teams, right? So if you were, quite often we were 10 hours a day on screens, right? Which is exhausting. So I realized fairly early on that for the type of content that I wanted to build, we didn't actually need to see people, but we do need to listen to them. So the idea was to remove the distraction. Like, I can see your vision behind you. You can see my little flat here. Once we removed the visual, we focused on what people had to say, which is ultimately the most important thing. So by taking away the distractions, and by the way, as a user, the fact that we're not looking at each other opens up huge opportunities for mobility. So using a phone, I decided to take away the screen, and using our phone, we built an app which allows, it's like an interactive podcast. Here we are on the podcast having a conversation, you and I. If you can imagine, we have no screen, we're on an app, and we have 30 other people on the conversation with us. So obviously they're not all going to speak at once, but They can raise their hand, and we have a topic. So what we're doing is we built an app that connects lawyers in a curated community around the curated content. So Platforum 9 is a platform made up of forums, which are communities of lawyers that meet on a regular basis, ideally weekly, bi-weekly, for what we now call, where's the word? Oh yeah, a lovely word I heard the other day called, I said espresso format content, but actually it's called content snacking. So the new word,
Content smacking?
snacking.
Snacking. Okay.
So yeah, so the idea is that particularly for the younger generation of lawyer, we've built a tool that will allow and empower particularly younger lawyers to engage in live conversations with other lawyers about their practice area or the issues that matter to them. So we're a new medium. We've just completed our beta test. We're just about to scale. We've been in UK and Europe. We have a number of lawyers from large firms, medium firms, small firms. We're validating. I've done about 75 actual live sessions on the app already. And at the moment, we're just doing sessions because we're testing what is interesting, what do they like. We're learning a lot about our users. The one big thing that I've learned, the big takeaway, is that there is no good time of the day to get the lawyers on the app.
Right.
Are all super, super busy. We make the content and the delivery of the content snappy. So short, snappy, and it's all live, recorded, then transcribed to text, and then summarized with AI. And we'll check it out. It's on our website. You can check out our blog, which has all our session summaries on it. But the whole point here is, particularly for young lawyers who don't get to travel as much, certainly not internationally, to bring the international community closer to them in a way that suits them, which means short and snappy, content snacking, which means informal. So we're looking at professional content, but delivered in a conversational style where they can have their say. Vitally important that they can speak. Permission to approach, permission to ask anyone. And that's kind of the philosophy behind it, because there's something missing really for lawyers all over the world. We have LinkedIn, which is an amazing tool, but it serves it serves that purpose. It's not necessarily a community builder, and you build communities over time. It doesn't happen. Trust you don't get over time. Ideally, our hope is that in time, those communities will be strong and powerful and will have such trust between the members that people refer business to each other. They can ask questions of the other. Just when you build a genuine community where they like each other, if they travel, they go visit each other, maybe, but bringing it closer without having to travel the world. Because honestly, one, law firms are so busy. They have huge high targets. It's difficult, time wise. Two, because of the fact that there's such turnover amongst young lawyers, they're not staying in law firms forever. So law firms are not investing the same amount of money at international travel. They're not doing it as much. And thirdly, they don't want to. Actually, increasingly, they feel, no, I'd rather have my time off and go to the gym or take my holidays or, so it's different. I'm not saying everywhere, but there seems to be a trend that I'm hearing from law firms.
Well, I have a ton of questions. The first one is, from my own experience, like when we have talks, podcasts like this, I think everyone who participates in it as a speaker would hope for interactivity, would hope for more questions. And so that's something I've experienced as a friction point throughout. How did you tackle that to actually, and maybe it's not a question of technology really, but just like creating the environment where people feel safe to interact. But how did you do that?
Well, what I've done so far, I must admit, we only have 200 people on the app right now. We've just been doing this for 2 months, so it's early days. What I do, again, because I'm co-moderating all of the content with our thought leaders and moderators, right? So I'm there. First thing I do, if there's a small group, we don't have huge numbers on it. We have 10, 15 lawyers at the moment, which is fine. Not even on every session, fully open. I make them all speakers immediately. And if I see the conversation is going and I see there's people there, I just say, Tom, I see you there. Have you got anything there from Poland? Is there anything, and Tom will say, that's really interesting. I've got a question, or I have incidences where Tom disappears,
Yeah.
But that's kind of funny because then I realized Tom had told me he was in the gym actually, so he couldn't really
Right.
speak. Or they're
Or Tom
dry.
got cold feet or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's all. Again, remember, not everyone's a native English speaker, by the way.
Yeah.
We're looking at parts of the world where they're listening in to understand context, to understand language. I mean, it's really super important. So when we're in live sessions, we stimulate and promote. Secondly, we have a chat format within the session. So if you're an introvert or you're busy or you just don't want to speak publicly, you can always, you can message the whole group, right, while you're live. You can attach a document live. You can then message one-on-one, direct message each other live. And what we're introducing as a new feature, which is a good point that you raised regarding the questions, is how do we manage the questions between our sessions? And I think that's where, when we set up our forums, the forum will be, let's say, private equity in Northern Europe. That will be the forum. And that forum will have sessions every Tuesday at 4 or every second Tuesday at 4, whatever. But there will be messaging going on related to that particular forum, specifically and only to the people in that forum who are members of that forum. So again, it's self-selecting. It's not all things to all people, because I think that's where the content overload is killing us. There's just too much content. So we're stripping away the content. You only get what you want because you've subscribed to it. And if you want to participate in answering, if somebody has a question, I haven't seen this, I have seen that. Right now, I'm in a lot of WhatsApp groups, and that's how it works in the WhatsApp groups. We're just moving it to a conversation. I'm not saying a conversation with a WhatsApp messaging between it, probably. So that's how I think we'll continue the engagement. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a talk about something, there's a continuous chat between different sessions. And one basic question that I have for you is like, who are your users? Are these large law firms? Are they like associates outside of the firms? Yeah.
No, the whole idea is, because we built it, it's called Platforum 9. The 9, people ask, what's the 9 all about? It's like, well, again, in terms of protecting the name, it was a name that was available. All of the names that I wanted to use were already, taken. So the 9 are 9 universal topics. They are health, tech, trade, deals, energy, property, infrastructure, resources, and rights. So we break down the whole world to 9 universal topics. And within those topics, we can then break them down. Pharma in healthcare, medical negligence, insurance and health. It would break them down so they slot into one of these. Because I think one of the challenges with Clubhouse was it was all things to all people. And it was, when we look at the content, once it dumbed down, no offense to Clubhouse, but yeah. Once it became that, it lost, and lawyers do not have time. So we're looking at time poor people in a very heavily regulated, content heavy industry, only going to get worse, by the way. If we can sort of manage that well, I think it's kind of more effective. So that's how we kind of broke it down.
Yeah, it makes sense to have a professional grade version of Clubhouse. For sure.
I think particularly a niche. I mean, you could do it in many other niches, but obviously legal is super important to me, given the career and the impact that I think that lawyers can and do have on the world around them. We just need to step up in some ways.
And I like the idea, the analog as well, about it being this continuous conference in a way, where you can network with people.
Yes, because that's the point I've made a lot to conference organizers. We know many, many wonderful events, and I've spent my career going to conferences. What you have with a conference is you have a curated community around curated content for a day. So look at the power that you could have if you can leverage off that day for the next 364 days. So you're building a continuous I'm not saying conference because it's not designed. What we're looking at, somebody said to me the other day, the point about that, it's not a prepared podcast. So I even when I'm moderating now myself, I prefer when we don't really, like now, we have no particular, it's so much easier when it just flows as a conversation. And particularly when people come in from the audience, and it's like, oh, right, where did that go? Where did that come from? And there's a joy. And, I think it's fascinating when you see where conversations can and do go when people leverage ideas off each other, and it evolves, and it wasn't planned.
Super interesting and super valuable.
Hope so.
Well, well, what are your plans for Platform 9 in terms of getting it out there and getting more users and all that?
Thank you. Yeah, we're just now Q1. We're looking to scale to 1,000 users. So we're updating our website at the moment, but you just go to the App Store or Google Play, download the app. We had a waiting list system. It's free for everybody, not forever, but for now. Eventually, we'll be looking at a subscription-based model, but it's designed in a way that is effective so that any lawyer anywhere in the world can join us in a conversation. It's democratic access to content. We obviously will integrate with Stripe. We look at verification and payment. We look at all of that stuff down the line. But for the moment, until we see exactly which part of the community is reacting most positively and scaling quickly, we'll see where that goes. The other point I should raise is that in these forums, they're not just lawyers and law firms. So what we're doing is gathering anyone in the legal profession who's interested in the topic. So you could be in-house, you could be a regulator, you could be an NGO, you could be a law teacher, you could be a legal tech company, a consultant. It doesn't matter. You're there because the topic is so specific to you.
I think that's great. There's a lot of groups that kind of deal with that, but not within a entirely like professional large law firm setting. For example, like there's the Legal Hackers that
Yeah.
has a number of different chapters across the world. But I think having something of that nature that brings together professionals that are working at large law firms that share common interests and business and issues to talk about is fantastic. I'm also curious because I come from a legal AI company. To what extent you're using AI? You mentioned for summarization. Are there any other applications?
Yeah, that's it for now. But I think we're going to go baby step, baby step. Part of our value proposition is the human story. In a world where everyone's hopping on an AI bandwagon, we believe it's important in a services community, in a services world, and we are legal services, and that we absolutely retain the soft and what I call hardcore skills of being able to listen, being able to communicate, being able to articulate our differences, our experiences, our legal opinions on things. These are super important skills. And I worry a little bit with the intergenerational and remote work challenges that we have, that younger lawyers are not listening to how older lawyers may or may not be representing themselves. They're not, and they're increasingly quite anxious about speaking. And, it's text message, it's mark of a document, it's comments on the side. I was at a legal event and future lawyer event in London last year, I think. And, one of the heads of innovations at one of the firms just said, well, we're introducing the telephone. We're just going back to it's like we're going full circle, rather than, the whole email sort of correspondence and, everybody passing the buck in a way. Let's just pick up the phone and get it solved. So I think, we got to look at ways in which we can be efficient, but also retain that human connection when we work in teams together and we work in opposing. I mean, there's a lawyer on the other side. How do we communicate with these people effectively so that we can get the job done?
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of that. I think that marshaling the human element and bringing it to front and center is extremely important. And I think what you're doing really showcases that because a lot of us, I think, are getting sidetracked with all the talk about AI into looking at the result, looking at the deliverable, and not everything that comes before that, which is a very human, interaction between people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't, everyone, let's not forget, this is still a human world and we predominantly work with humans, and we are, flawed and, frustrating, but this is the world we live in, and I think not losing sight of those skills that are required to be effective in that world is key. And this is a tool and a medium that will facilitate, if they want to, Like, we'll see. It's very, very early days for us. I mean, we're a startup, so this is still about validating this value proposition for our users. But I'm excited. It's going to be a fun year. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Well, as we come towards the end, I have three questions that I want to ask that I ask everyone. The first one is, how do you do this? Like, there's so many things going on. You have so many irons in the fire. How do you how do you balance things? How do you keep moving forward?
I guess, and the other thing I should point, I'm a sole female founder. I did not expect to be doing this on my own. I thought I'd start and I'd find somebody. And very, very difficult to find co-founders in legal for something like this. Everyone is very much, as I said, on the AI sort of side and process-driven legal tech side of things. But ours is community-driven media legal tech kind of thing. And so I didn't expect, and I'm still, I'm now looking for a CTO. I'm talking to VCs who are looking at investing in this. It's an Irish company. We're scaling out of Dublin. I'm currently based in London. I do travel a lot. I think that keeps me sort of very sharp in terms of recognizing back the differences between jurisdictions and cultures and everything. How do I keep it going? I'm super motivated. Like I think, yeah, I like what I'm doing. I jump out of bed at 6 in the morning. I keep going. I am dead at the end of the day though, but I do keep going. I have a lot of energy, and it's a purpose-driven product really. And so that's, yeah, balanced, not so balanced, but balanced enough.
Yeah. So related to that is, what words of advice would you have for new entrepreneurs or lawyers about how to approach their career?
Yeah, again, I think going back to those very early days of, surrounding yourself with people who are can-doers. There's so many naysayers out there, and I think it's really important that you keep the right company. For an entrepreneur of any sort, you've got to be willing to lose everything. Like, the risk is huge. So the risk really is huge. On the other hand, you know, defining success. How do we define everyone has a very specific definition of success. And for me, it was, if I don't do this, I was convinced somebody else has got to do this, right? It's such a good idea. I still think it's a good idea. I spot the founder, obviously,
Yeah.
and I thought, if I don't do this, like, I'll really not forgive myself in a way for not even trying. And I think just take one step at a time, obviously one step consistently over time, every single day, just keep at it. And I'm blessed that I'm surrounded by supporters who'll just say, they'll, on a dark day where you've had lots of rejection, some of the people will say, just don't worry, just keep it up, just keep it up, just keep it up. And I think that's what sort of keeps me going. If I was to look at, what makes it worthwhile, as I guess is the last kind of comment, what makes it worthwhile is when people get it and understand the impact it could have. And that's what it's, for me, it's always been the recognition that this could really work, and having an idea and just working on building things, actually just get out and build something, anything. It could be a local community initiative. It could be, if you have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, doesn't have to be, this is kind of a bit of a big project. I'm not going to deny it. It's not a small project. I guess I didn't realize how large it was when I started. Would that have changed anything? Nope. I still think I was going to do it, and so if you're an entrepreneurial mind, you just do it. You just retain the agile mindset, which is, maybe it won't work this way. Maybe we try another way. Maybe we pivot. Maybe, let's see, just listen to the data, listen to the people, and just keep at it.
Well, inspiring words of wisdom, Patricia. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks a million, Tom. Talk to you soon.
Well, one last thing is, for the audience that's watching and listening, how can they keep in touch with you?
Well, they can just check out the Platforum 9 website. It's www.platforum9.com. And on the site, you can very easily download the app from the App Store, or mail me directly. So I'm happy to do Calendly conversations. I'm happy to do presentations. Happy to talk to anybody. We're at the very early stage of launching this product. Right now, it's in the EU. We will be scaling globally, step by step.
Well, thanks again, Patricia.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
And thanks to all of you for watching. See you next time. Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.